and yet very realistic. College football as we knew it was fun. Pour one out. Definitely feels like we're on our way to a Fox conference and ESPN conference.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some more cleared up, not even just with the Big Ten and who they might take, because I don't think that there's just enough for those two to just fully float the boat. Or otherwise, the ACC and the Big 12 can merge and they can be the real college football and still care about academics and care about that. What happens with March Madness?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know that's a separate thing and all that, but we're talking about the death of the NCAA, and now you got this movement. I'm just saying, I know that's the least of the concerns right now, but you just have to wonder about its status the more things are shifting around.
I just wonder.
And if there's two mega conferences that claim to be the AFC, NFC, then they would have, in theory, their own basketball tournament.
Theory in their own basketball tournament, not only that, but how much
networks do that?
How much do you want to?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but how much
they
do
would
you
go from the 317?
Well, no, I don't see, and that's where it gets interesting. Which is why I don't know if it'll happen, because you think about it this way: at what point do you say, "Look, you don't want to give us football money? Fine, do your own basketball tournament and see how that works out for you."
Right.
Because you're going to make more money on football, but are you going to do that to offset the amount of money that you make on the NCAA basketball tournament, which is actually the number one moneymaker for the whole of college athletics? No, you're not going to do that. So there's got to be some pushback here. Look, there's it feels like the college football gods are grabbing the big blanket and shaking it, and whoever holds on, holds on. And when that happens, it happens, and we'll figure it out. But there are some things that have to be done to push back, and the basketball tournament is certainly something that has to be thought about, because if you are – okay, say you're Washington State and Oregon State and you wind up in the Mountain West, and you've got all these things and the Big 12 and the ACC, who are the two of the three best basketball conferences, get pushed to the side in football. Do you not throw around a little bit of your basketball white and say, okay, listen, when we renegotiate this thing again, you don't want us in your football world? Well, we don't want you in our basketball world.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and I just think too, with everybody saying or not everybody, you got to be careful with that social media stuff too, of just people talking, but I have seen it on social media, and I've seen other people talk about the AFC, NFC whole premise. I mean, you're just going to leave 50 schools that have all been relevant and won conference titles and been successful. You're just going to they just don't matter all of a sudden just because these two have decided that they're going to break off and branch out? I don't think so. I think there's plenty of people that still care about Baylor and TCU and Oregon State and Wazoo and, a bunch of other schools. Yeah, certainly some of them might drop down. That was the fear with the Big 12 I remember all of the jokes, probably from a lot of Pac-12 fans actually. Enjoy the American Conference. Glorified American Conference. Boy, it's weird what happens when time goes by. But, yeah, I mean, there's going to be all these schools left over. So, and I know the Big 12 for 1 second, the likes of Mac Rhodes, they're not going to just sit there and go, well, we'll take our places, the second tier, and we're just not going to be as good as these other. No, hell no, they're not going to do that. So there's going to be a response of some sort, not a response that can match the team-for-team SEC or Big Ten slate, but there's more than enough interesting schools and regions and everything else and players. With all the players just going to end up at these 32 schools or whatever? Of course not. There's more guys and gals than they can just fit all those schools. So, yeah, it's fascinating. And like I said, this is like an onion that, has never-ending layers to it, because you could have a whole show just on simply the future of the Big Ten. You could have one just on the future of the SEC. You could have the future on just those two in super conferences. You could have one just on the death of the Pac-12 potentially. You could have one on the Big 12's last year and the next year.
Championship. Yeah.
March Madness, NIL. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane.
There's no way. First of all, there is a way, but the men's basketball tournament is a powerful, as you mentioned, Paul. It's gonna survive. It's just a matter of what's it going to be like. And you wonder why can't all the conferences just remain the same and just in football terms, it's different.
Yeah, it is. And look,
why? Why could they ever do that? I mean, somebody
just do football only super conferences.
Yeah, you'll do your thing in football, but we're still going to keep what we have when it comes to basketball.
They'd only be able to do that if you're pushed into the corner, because why would you? If you have that negotiating power, you don't want to lose it unless it's completely taken away from you.
I mean, I do wonder, though, about USC baseball going to go to Wisconsin on a Wednesday?
Yeah.
And then come back. I mean, like the travel part of this, I mean, I know it's a smaller world than ever in so many ways, but I mean, it does make you wonder. And I mean, the employment part of this, that was touched on a little bit earlier with Dan Lust, and we kind of mentioned it there, but that's another full show that you could do that just simply based off of the news today and the news from last summer. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, there are so many questions and so many different scenarios and so many things that we have no idea about yet. Like, who else does the Big Ten want potentially? I see a John Wilner tweet who's as locked into the Pac-12 as anybody, and he had, a quote from, I guess it was an unnamed source or so, talking about, they're at this amount now with USC and UCLA. That deal could be done as soon as tonight. Should be done by tomorrow. Many people have now reported, but what's the threshold? He had a tweet about there being a certain threshold that you would have to almost be a USC, UCLA type of brand. Well, that leaves what? Maybe Oregon and Washington, if that, even really, if you're talking about USC level brand. But as far as close to that, them only. So if there's this threshold, then, does that, who else are they maybe looking at that's not the Pac-12? Who's maybe, who maybe staying pat and they're fine with where they are. And how does that, I mean, I don't know. There's a billion questions, like I said, and it's all fascinating. And the thing that's weird about it is, like, I'm not an agent of chaos where I just love for everything to be chaotic just because I, just love seeing the world burn or anything like that. This is fascinating being able to be on the other side of it versus last summer, though, where we were the people going, holy crap, what happens to Baylor and their entire future, or TCU, or all of these other schools? And now they're asking that out on the West Coast. And, I hate it as a lifelong college football fan. It's always been my favorite sport, and a big part of it was the unique parts of college football, the tradition and the rivalries and the conferences and all that, and all that's just going away, and things change as you get older. But, I mean, this is a pretty massive change we're talking about here to this sport of college football we've seen in the last 2 years, and I just wonder if it's all for the good or if this is going to be something we look back on in a few years and go, man, they really killed something special.
It's interesting to think about the Pac-12's history, too, in that they've been as chaotic, really, as the Big 12 has when they're, when it comes to membership. And they've kind of benefited from the fact that, look, they've got the same kind of infighting that the Big 12 has when they've got, Stanford and Cal kind of calling the shots on academics, USC on that a little bit too, and what they want and don't want and how this has to be and how, like I said, Stanford has its own way. It's a completely different institution. And
I could totally see them bolting big time.
Yeah. But the Big 12, because the schools that were the malcontents or the schools that were causing the problems, or maybe not causing, but at the center of them, Texas, Oklahoma, whoever, we're all good for, in everything for the most part of most people's lives. You have your stretches of bad, but they're brand names. Stanford is a brand name in academics, but and it should be in athletics, but not in football, not in basketball, where people really think about them all that much. So, maybe the Pac-12 was kind of hiding behind the chaos that was going on in the Big 12, dealing with their own problems. And Larry Scott left a really big mess there, and people didn't quite understand. And so Big 12 fans can be pissed at Bob Bowlesby all they want, but he wasn't Larry Scott.
Garrett, earlier in the